Hey everyone, welcome back to another Switchcraft review. Today I'm going to be talking about Darkest Dungeon by Red Hook Studios. I'm not sure if I should call this a review. I'm nowhere near completing the game, but at this point I feel like I have a pretty good handle on my overall thoughts on the game, and I'm just having so much fun playing that I wanted to talk about it. Darkest Dungeon is a hardcore RPG. Your mission is to take over the mansion that belonged to your ancestors, which has fallen into disrepair. You can ignore the story if you want, though. It's told through optional journal entries that you get in the dungeons, and if you read them, then go for it, and if you don't, then you don't. As well as some cutscenes, which are also kind of collected in town. There's a button that you can push that will show you all of the cutscenes that you've unlocked so far. Gameplay is really broken into two phases. There's the combat phase when you go into the dungeon, and then there's the other phase, which is basically like the maintenance phase when you are in town and trying to take care of all of your heroes that have taken damage or become stressed out by their delve into the dungeon itself. Let's talk about combat first. Each character has two resources. They've got normal hit points and then stress. If their hit points falls to 0, then that character will be considered to be at death's door, and they have to be healed before they take any more damage, or they'll die. If their stress gets too high, they'll start to gain what are called afflictions. These last until you're treated in town, which is pretty costly. These could change your stats or behaviors. Your character might insist on taking loot for themselves, which means then that you can't count that loot for yourself. They can also start to verbally berate the rest of the team. This can increase the stress of the party, and it can quickly get out of control. The character might start changing the order of the formation, which makes it harder for you to be effective in combat. So maybe your frontliner gets scared and runs away. They go to the back line, and now you have to spend extra turns to get everybody back in the correct positions, which is very, very important to the gameplay. Before you can continue to do damage to the enemy team. In addition to that, if you let the stress build too far, the character's body will give out and they'll have a heart attack and die. So you have to be ready and prepared to fail at some quests, because sometimes it's just all too much for your party to survive. And running away is always an option, and it's an option you're going to have to use a lot. It's honestly a pretty brilliant system, and when you have a full bar of stress on a character, you, the player, start to feel it as well, especially since the game has permadeath and constantly autosaves. Your decisions have consequences, and you will absolutely have to deal with them. Perhaps your character gets rabies, or maybe your party filled with your favorite adventurers dies a horrible death because you decided to put a torch in this strange purple thing, which just don't do that. That's a bad idea. Anyway, after finishing a mission, you'll be shown your treasure, and your party will be given positive and negative quirks. These can vary, but for example, if your Crusader earns the God-fearing quirk, it will make it so that that character will only rest in a church. So they won't go to a brothel or gamble in order to reduce stress. And once they gain stress, they keep that stress until you find a way to reduce it in town. That doesn't seem so bad, but now you have to start balancing. These three characters all have stress, and this one won't go to gamble, and this one won't go to the brothel, and this one won't go to church. So you have to figure out who's going to go where. Where is it that Sir Galahad's going to rest? And if you don't get rid of the negative quirks, they start to become more intense, and what's even worse, far more expensive to cure. When you first start playing the game, you get to choose the difficulty, but you also get to control how difficult the game is during gameplay through the use of torches. As you move through a quest, your torch will burn down, and if you don't renew it, the game gets harder. However, if your party's getting weak and you're afraid that you may not make it, lighting a few torches can reduce the difficulty enough so that you might make it back to the hamlet. Unfortunately, rewards seem to be averse to light, and the more torches that you light, the less treasure you'll be able to take away. There's a very deep level of strategy in the game. It seems quite daunting at first, but you'll quickly get a handle on what you should and should not do. You have a lot of resources to keep track of outside of combat, and there's a lot of player choice as to how to allocate those resources to best garner success out of your party. You'll definitely feel overwhelmed at first, and normally I'm not a fan of guides, but looking up how some of the mechanics work really isn't a bad idea. The game gives you enough to play, but not enough for you to feel comfortable, and that might be by design. Personally, I was lucky as I was streaming the game, and veterans of the game were there and they were giving me some pointers as I played. For instance, when I first started playing, I found combat to be pretty frustrating because I didn't quite understand all the underlying mechanics that went into it. Everything just felt like hit the button and pray to RNGesus that it works. There's definitely more to it than that, and the people that were watching me play quickly pointed it out. That being said, there's definitely a level of RNG to the game that can sometimes be frustrating, and here's an example. I did lose one of my favorite characters because my healer healed him for 0. You know, it's just a bad roll of the dice, and how many RPGs have you played where that wouldn't happen from time to time? Probably none. I don't have a lot to say about the graphics. You've been watching the video, so you've seen what they look like. The artwork is hand-drawn and awesome. I really adore the animations in the game. They're impactful and they're interesting and they're just really fun to look at. The music in the game pairs perfectly with the gameplay and the visuals, and the narrator's voice is filled with a creepiness as well as a purpose that I just love. While fighting, in addition to the visual cues that you get from the game, the narrator will also give you audio cues about what's happening to your party. I did notice, however, there's a slight crackle when playing the game when it is docked. This isn't isolated to Darkest Dungeon, however. It's a known issue in a few Switch games. Skyrim has an issue. Stardew Valley had the same issue. And clearly it's an issue with the Switch, but it's definitely something that developers can fix because Stardew Valley has fixed it on their end. I think this is the first time that I've said this, but the JoyCons feel better than the Pro Controller on this game. And for me, it has to do with the length of the stick throw when navigating the menus. On the Pro Controller, the throw just feels too far, so I feel like I have to push it way too far in order to get the selector to go over to the next thing. But on the Joy-Cons, it's much better. That being said, I do wish that you could use the D-pad to navigate battle menus rather than the left stick, but it certainly isn't a deal breaker. I would say that the game would definitely benefit from having more customizable controls. You can also use the touchscreen to play the game, but I feel like some of the touch targets are a bit too small. I found myself quickly retreating to the relative comfort of the Joy-Cons. I think the way that you interact with the game in some ways is frustrating. If I want a character to move to the bar, I have to have the bar open and then select the character and then move them to the appropriate slot, whereas it would be much better if I could just open the bar, select the spot that I want to go to, and have the game show me which characters are willing to go there to reduce stress. It's small things like that that would make the out-of-combat stuff a lot more enjoyable. Sometimes I felt like I was fighting with the controls because the game is clearly designed with a mouse in mind. I almost wish that they had a virtual cursor that could use gyro controls in the right Joy-Con in order to emulate a mouse. I think that that would really solve a lot of problems for me if it was done well. Darkest Dungeon is a great game with a mix of awesome moments and just the right amount of number crunching to let you have a blast while on a quest and then sit back and try and problem solve all the issues plaguing your adventurers in town. If you like turn-based strategy RPGs, this game is an absolute 100% must-buy on the Nintendo Switch. I have so much more to do in the game, and I can't wait to get back to it, but I just wanted to talk about it as soon as I could. Let me know what you think of Darkest Dungeon, and be sure to check out my podcast, Nintendo Switchcraft, over at runjumpstomp.com/listen. And of course, stop by the Twitch stream sometime and say hello.